Vitello Tonnato is one of the best examples of a dish that's been corrupted beyond recognition over the years. Now the form it usually takes is some canned tuna blended with store-bought mayonnaise and used as a glob of goop next to some pork like the contents of a tuna sandwich. In fact, it's very hard to find an English language recipe for the authentic dish now, and even most of the Italian language versions have been compromised for economy or in the interests of appearance over flavor. Here's the real Vitello Tonnato made with quality ingredients from scratch.
Now, this is the kind of meat that you don't see too often in other countries because it was very poorly butchered, but it does have part of an eye of round in it, and if you lived in Russia, you would be congratulating me that I was able to find this sort of veal at all. It's nearly impossible to find. It's one of the reasons why this recipe has taken a while, because being able to find the veal is so difficult. But I'm gonna cook this entire piece. I'm gonna braise the entire piece, and then later it'll be my problem to shave off just the eye of round part. You probably won't have to go through that. You'll be able to get eye of round veal. Also, I have leek, about 150 grams of leek, no big green tail. Cut it off before it gets to the dark green part. About 100 grams of carrot, 100 grams of celery, a few cloves of garlic. The white wine vinegar, it probably looks orange in the camera there because this particular type of Italian vinegar, even though it's made from white grapes, it's pretty intense. And of course the white wine. I have a braising dish. I'm going to do something different, something I don't usually do. I'm going to put the herbs in at the bottom here. There's the thyme, there's the marjoram, a little bit more marjoram, okay. Also the bay leaves. This is going to help keep the herbs from sticking to the meat, so we won't have to try to pick them off later. And I'm just going to give the garlic a little quick chop. Doesn't need to be cut up fine for this. And we'll put those in the bottom too. Then on top of that are the vegetables that have been chopped up. And the white wine, 100 milliliters of white wine. The white wine vinegar, about 30 milliliters. And now we're going to put the meat on top of this. And season it. We have fresh ground white pepper this time. Don't use black. And you can be fairly liberal with it, but don't forget this meat's going to be packed under other flavorful substances. It's almost like just a canvas for the sauce. Okay, and then some salt. Again, the salt level will be adjusted later too, so it doesn't have to be exact. And then finally, I'll put the lid on it and begin to braise in the preheated oven. Once the veal is in the oven braising, now we'll turn our attention to the tuna because that needs some time to cool off too, in order to make the sauce without it spoiling, as you'll see. So we got some water here. I've got an onion, but I'm not going to cut it up fine. I'm just going to cut it into quarters because we don't want small pieces mixing up with the carrots. And the carrots in this case are actually going to be used after we pull them off from being cooked with the tuna. They're going to be used later in the dish. So also take care. Cut them into a nice matchstick like this. We've got 50 milliliters of apple cider vinegar, half a teaspoon of ground white pepper, and a whole teaspoon of granulated garlic. Again, the reason why I'm using this instead of fresh garlic is because the fresh garlic would get mixed up with the carrots. It wouldn't be pretty, it would be a mess. So use granulated garlic, there'll be plenty of flavor. And finally, a few sprigs of parsley that have been tied up with string. Again, to facilitate pulling it out without it getting mixed up with the carrots. And I forgot to mention, we also need the white wine. It's about 60 mils of white wine, a little bit more. There's the 50 mils of apple cider vinegar, pepper, the garlic powder, there's the onion quarters, and the parsley. Now, Okay, once it comes up to a rolling boil like this, give it a stir and turn the heat down. This will have gotten the pepper and the white pepper and the garlic a chance to dissolve into it, so it won't all stick to the carrots. Now we can add the carrot pieces in there. And we're going to let these cook for about 5 minutes before we continue. Maybe 4 minutes. 4 minutes will be enough. See, it's been about 4 minutes. Now I'm putting this piece of fresh albacore tuna in. And we begin counting the time. Turn the piece over once in a while, especially if it's sticking up out of the water at all. After 10 minutes, I'm going to pull the tuna out of here. Not the carrots, just the tuna. And we're going to let the carrots continue simmering until they're tender, which won't be too much longer. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit more. And then I'll remind you again now, do not throw this liquid out when you're done with it. You're going to pass it through you're going to remove the onions and the parsley, pass it through a sieve, but you're going to keep the liquid because you're going to need part of this liquid for making the mayonnaise. So I picked the parsley and most of the onion out of there. If there's a few little tiny specks of onion or tuna in the carrot, that'll be okay because it'll disappear in the final product. This is the broth from it that we're going to save right now. It's still very hot, and the tuna. We're going to let all this cool down. Don't worry about it spoiling. The tuna is fully cooked. Let it sit for about an hour. Veal is still braising. We'll continue in about an hour. One thing we can do right now, though, is to transfer the carrots to the refrigerator. There's some gunk stuck at the bottom. It's little bits of tuna and stuff. So when you dump out the carrots, here's the key. A few of this little bit of lumps is okay, but you don't want too much. We don't need all of these carrots anyway. So just dump the part that comes out clean, and then this just goes in the trash. Veal is still braising away, but it's time to make this mayonnaise and start getting that cold. We have this liquid that was drained from the tuna. I'm going to set this off to the side right now. We have a blender from a stick cup. The olive oil I'm using is a really good one. You can tell from the dark green color. I'm going to add the capers, anchovies, good quality anchovies if you can get them, egg yolks, and we'll crumble this tuna. And finally, I'm going to add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper and a little splash of this liquid that the tuna was cooked in. Just going to add a little bit to begin with, just to moisten it up. And then finally we're going to thin it out with a little bit more of this broth that the fish was cooked in. Once you do that, you can throw the rest of that broth out, or I don't know, you can use it for poaching some other fish, I guess. Okay, this is about right. It's mayonnaise, but it's on the thin side because it's going to sit in the refrigerator for a couple of days, and it'll thicken up as that happens. After the emulsion is formed and it's stable, I'm going to taste it. I determined I needed about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and I'm adding that 25 milliliters of lemon juice. Blend it again, taste it again, see if it needs more salt. This is what it looks like after 2 hours. Now I'm going to take it, flip it over. Scrape these off, and it's going to go back in the oven. with the lid back on it again. After about another hour, I've turned it over one more time, and I'm going to put the lid back on it and just let it cool to room temperature now. The next step is to slice the veal. Don't make the pieces too big. This is about the biggest you want one, and you don't want them too small either. This is okay. They're not going to come out exactly perfect through the whole piece. But the important part, pull out any gristle or large chunks of fat and just get rid of that. You may have a fairly large pile of this depending on the piece of veal that you've got. But this veal is fairly dry. But very flavorful. If you taste it, which I'm sure you will as you're working on this, you'll see what it lacks mostly is moisture, and that's obviously why this recipe was invented in the first place, because the moisture of the mayonnaise will fix the dryness of the veal. Now, because I waited until the next day to do this, the mayonnaise type sauce has thickened up some, which is going to make this go a lot easier. So you put a little bit down, you begin layering veal over the top of it. Make sure that it's all in contact with sauce. Then, a little bit more sauce. You can put several layers of veal. Exactly how many is up to you. You're going to cover it with sauce in the end, as you'll see. Okay, I've got 3 layers of veal there, which is about how many I like to go. You don't want to make it too thick. And then make sure that you add enough sauce to completely cover it. The sauce is certainly part of the dish. It's not like a regular sauce because it has that tuna in it. So this is part of the protein in the dish. Then, when it's completely covered, you're going to put cling film over the top of this and refrigerate it for 2 or 3 days, ideally. You can serve it the next day. I know a lot of people do. It's actually originally it's refrigerated 4 or 5 days. I think that's a bit much. 2 or 3 days is perfect.
I'm very pleased to announce the release of Volume 3, The Focus on Food Chemistry. I want to clear up a few things about these 3 volumes. First, they all contain completely different information. There's no duplication, they're not revisions. When I wrote Volume 1, I had 2.5 years of YouTube videos to cover. People had been asking me for the printed list of ingredients for all of those dishes, and so I obliged. There are recipes with stepwise directions and many tips offered throughout, as well as an extensive history of Russian cuisine over the last 1,000 years, but Volume 1 is very different from Volume 2 and 3. In Volumes 2 and 3, I only had about 9 months of YouTube recipes to cover in each, so I was able to provide stepwise directions for everything. In Volume 2, I included a lot of additional information about cooking and some simple examples of flavor chemistry to set the stage for Volume 3. While Volume 2 hopefully got you thinking about some of the processes that go on in cooking and how flavors are expressed and sensed at the molecular level, the topic was painted with pretty broad strokes to make it easy to digest, pun intended. Volume 3 is a milestone of the series, in which I have included an entire introductory course in food chemistry, which is why Volume 3 is about 70 pages longer than Volume 2. And if you just want the recipes, that's okay too. You don't have to read the first few chapters, but if you've ever been curious about what influences tastes and flavors and the rationale for deciding cooking times and temperatures and why things taste different when they're combined in different ways, this book will answer many of those questions. It also paves the way for Volume 4, which will be next year. I'm pleased to announce a new, completely different type of cookbook. If you watch my channel regularly, you know that the recipes I present are usually centered on meat or seafood and seldom vegetarian dishes. This new book is a departure from that norm. Only vegetables, fruits, eggs, and dairy are used in dozens of recipes here. The key here is that these recipes don't taste like typical vegetarian food. This isn't a bunch of salads and bean sprouts wrapped in pita bread. These are completely satisfying, hearty dishes that use the science of food chemistry to produce meat-like aromas and flavors. But don't worry, there's no weird chemicals involved, just ordinary foods and spices that you can get in any grocery store. This really is an entirely new approach. These are flavorful, filling meals produced by a distinctive cooking method and unexpected combinations of ingredients. Once you see how it's done and understand the method, you can apply these preparations to some of your own recipes and transform them into vegetarian dishes too. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.